Apoorv, great to have the opportunity to sit down with you today on this episode of Strategy Unscripted, and really appreciate the opportunity to be able to chat. I know it's something that we've been discussing and trying to organise for a couple of months now, and for one reason or other, generally constraints with work and business, we haven't been able to. But today it's great to have the time to sit down. So to begin with, it would be great if you could just give a little bit of an introduction to yourself, personally and professionally, some of the work that you've done and some of the work that you do, because your story is a very interesting one, and the work that you're involved in is very exciting. So it'd be great to hear it in your own words.
Great. No, thanks, Ben. Thanks for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here, and again, I'm sort of looking forward to the conversation. As your name says, it's unscripted, so I'm coming completely unscripted here. Uh, just taking a bit of my background. I come from India, and I was born and brought up there, and I did all my higher education, and in fact. First kind of 8 to 10 years of my professional career in various parts of India, but typically, coming from the north part of India, and then spending a lot of my formative years in Delhi. Uh, Academic wise, I'm an engineer by education, but never really wanted to be into the hardcore technical side of software programming. So I started, after my engineering, as a quality assurance and testing professional. So for sort of, I thought it's always easy to find bugs in people's codes rather than write one. Did it a couple of years, and then I was always tempted to get the digital and the technology side of things into more business oriented and business value. So I pursued my masters in business. After that, and then ever since then, I joined an IT consulting company where I worked for just over an year. That is where typically you kind of get into a lot more industry level solutioning. I was always during my business studies as well inclined to the consumer side of things, because that is something which I feel you can touch and feel, and I relate to. I'm a consumer of all of these organizations which I work for as well. So I really get tempted to do that, and then I got my kind of breakthrough with GSK GlaxoSmithKline in the consumer healthcare business in 2010. And I just grabbed that opportunity. Again, I've always been working into what today we call as the digital transformation. Back from a time when it was not called transformations, there were different names. You were either the IT manager or the IT demand manager, getting into a business partner, getting into automations, business process reengineering. But I think in spirit, you always do understand the technology and the power of technology and data, and then just you understand the business you operate in and what the business is, and you're the perfect kind of a conduit and bridge to say what you should be doing to really elevate the value on the business. So that's what I've been doing overall. Fast forward 2014, I came still as part of a GSK on a development assignment in the UK, which was initially planned to be for an year, but as luck would have it, you can never plan enough in life. It just transpired into something more permanent, kind of evolving over here for me. And me and my wife kind of just grabbed that opportunity to stay in the UK. So
Great.
been more than 10 years in the UK now. Continuing to a variety of roles in GSK at a global scale, as well as very focused onto a particular business and market as well. And then eventually, I kind of moved out from technically kind of the label of IT into what we are now calling as transformation, which is a sweet spot which is sitting between businesses and IT. In some organizations, still part of the IT. In other organizations, it's kind of technically sitting as part of your business. But eventually, you end the same thing. In spirit, what I said. You really understand the value of digital and technology and data, and translate and kind of manifest it into the way it can actually add value to the organization. Currently, I'm working with PepsiCo. For the last just over 4 years, I'm leading the global transformation program on trade promotion management, which is one of the very key areas of revenue growth management, very specific to the FMCG and CPG industry. But you can tell it's one of the most critical from a financial point of view, because it's the biggest kind of line item sitting in your P&L where, a lot of your fund, investments go. And I'm kind of enjoying what I do.
Fantastic. No, fantastic. And really appreciate the very in-depth introduction. As I was saying, there's a lot to unpack, and it's a very interesting journey from quality assurance through to trade promotion management today. Also, you were saying that it's hard to avoid as a consumer some of the brands, the organizations you work for. And when you consider GSK, when you consider Haleon, when you consider PepsiCo, it's hard to walk down the street or go a week without engaging with or buying or using one of, if not many more of those brands. Very, very commonly found. And with those companies in mind, is there a common thread that you found in that journey working for those type of organizations?
It's very interesting, Ben. I would say I found quite different dynamics into organization, which is the interesting part. So, I wouldn't say, particularly, most of my professional career has been shaped up in terms of GSK, where I was more than 11 years actually in the organization, and then obviously over 4 years in PepsiCo. And if I compare these two organizations, completely different in terms of the DNA, as we call it. And I'm not surprised, with one being a UK headquartered and one being a pure out and out American headquarters. So, and it's a very interesting observation. You learn from both sides of things, because there's no perfect way of doing business. I think the kind of big learning, if I have to take, and particularly true to the theme on the strategy unscripted from my GSK days, is how beautifully that organization translated or sort of define what a global strategy is, and how you cascade it down, contextualizing at each level for each function, each business unit, that what you want to do. And I have to say that almost remains like a gold standard for me in terms of how you get everyone aligned in a particular period of time, with a particular kind of a leadership. In contrast, when you come to PepsiCo, you see a lot more hunger for action and results, which is a different kind of a strategy as well. So yes, you will have a kind of a global mission and a vision and strategy, but really, if it is not leading to action and results, it's not something which is kept on for long. So very, very interesting perspectives on both organizations. I'm very fortunate to actually experience both and really learn the kind of the best part of both. But I think it is also reflective of the industry, and I think your strategy is always reflective of the ecosystem you're operating in. So if you could look at the products from GSK, completely scientific in nature, very, very strong brands. People live and die for those brands. People start with those brands and end with those brands. So you have to be a very consistent, very trusted, organization in there, and that was just showing into their strategy, their thoroughness in terms of every execution that was being planned. Versus if you come to PepsiCo brands, high energy, always with the young, high adrenaline consumers. You have to keep up the pace with the Gen Z or whatever it's called now, and you can't afford to be a brand which is moving at a 6 months or a 1 year kind of a change paradigm.
Test, learn,
it's
iterate.
Every month, every event. And that's the DNA and that's the strategy. So you have to keep a pace with it, and I think it's doing it wonderfully well. And that's the product is like. So you always operate in the ecosystem you are, which is your industry, but also your consumer. And I believe there's no strategy that's good or bad. It's just basically what suits you well.
Yeah, of course. And there's the famous phrase, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. Did you find that within the organizations you worked, specifically GSK through to PepsiCo, that there's the culture, that people are embedded in the strategy, they feel it and then they live and breathe it?
I think I couldn't agree more, and I think some of these quotes you read, and then you realize, okay, what does it mean until you have actually been through and experienced that. And I would say in both organizations I have experienced where, if you come into a particular setup of an organization or a function or a business, where your leadership and the culture is not aligned to the larger strategy and culture that the company is trying to drive, no matter what the academia and the expertise and the capability of the people is, it will lead you nowhere.
course.
And obviously, without sharing my details, but yeah, absolutely, I kind of completely stand by that. Is the culture is what actually drives a lot of it. But actually, that is, to be honest, I believe that is also a part of your strategy. What culture you want to drive, because strategy has many aspects, and one of it is, what is the culture? Do you want to give empowerment? Do we want to really give them ownership, or do you actually want to get into a very military oriented kind of an execution plan as a strategy, and hence you will drive that culture at the board, downwards in the organization. So it's all part of the strategy.
And your role in particular, or your last couple of roles have been, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but heavily leaned towards the transformation side. So taking the sometimes top-down delivered strategy that, as you said, cascades down through business units and functions, and ultimately where the rubber meets the road, making it happen.
Yeah.
How have you found that? What are the challenges, and I imagine there are quite a few, but the challenges and solutions in a grand sense to transformation work? Because it's something we hear a lot, but what does it really mean?
Yeah, so, and you have absolutely, interpreted and defined it absolutely correctly. I'm not the one who has been calling out an organization strategy or, in my area. But what we do is we try to kind of embed and that strategy and make sure through our transformation and through our local strategy within that particular transformation or organization, how do you kind of complement the strategy, and I kind of take it forward and make sure it's executed on the ground. As I said, in an environment where your strategy is defined in a simple way so that everyone can feel and associate with it. Brings back to again another quote, about the Kennedy and the moon landing. Much easier said that but everyone, even the janitor there, and everyone from a guard was clear that we are doing it to land a man on the moon. That is very true actually. If you actually have simplified your strategy and then kind of cascaded it down to the respective layers to start being true to it in spirit, but having the empowerment and the autonomy to really find out how do you manifest it in various ways. I think that is a beautiful setup where ownership comes in. You do get results which are all in line with the direction of your strategy. That doesn't mean you won't fail, but you fail and learn fast, and everyone is an owner to kind of correct things, and then your whole organization moves in the same direction with a lot of engagement. Contrast to that, if you and a lot of times there's a confusion between strategy and a kind of a granular plan. If it's a plan coming down from the top down to execute, then you are really not adding a lot of value at each level. And then as leaders across the layers, our job is to really contextualize, assess the situation, because everything, everywhere the ecosystem is different, people are different, and then kind of translate that. Now that become that, and some companies excel in doing that. You might still kind of execute the plan perfectly well on the ground, but any surprises and the hypothesis if it's working or not, you will only get to know when you've actually hit it the ground, not through the layers, because you're not actually improvising, course correcting, and you're not empowering the layers to actually add value to it. So there were very two very different kind of approaches to it. If you ask me, I will be more in the lobby of kind of the empowerment and autonomy, because that's the whole job of the leadership into strategy and transformation. Beyond that, I think AI will come and replace everything which is technical.
Perhaps. I mean, certainly we see the impact of that more and more, especially in what we do. And your roles are now quite heavily focused on revenue growth management and also trade promotion management. So these are areas within your function which are quite specific and to use the phrase, you can't bullshit the results. It's very tangible. It's you could see it on the piece of paper in front of you in terms of the results that are delivered. How do you effectively take an overriding global strategy, which is distilled down into a business unit, and then ultimately is cascaded down into your area of the business, which at the scale at which you work within PepsiCo is significant, to say the least. How do you go about the process as a leader there, distilling that and ensuring that the team that you lead are clear on the goals, are clear on how it nests back up to the overriding strategy, and then are in a position to go and execute?
I love that question, Ben. I think there's so much of experience and perspective coming in that question, because that's always the hardest. And by the way, there's no silver bullet. No one has got it right.
Otherwise, yeah.
But you're absolutely right, because in the area of transformation, we believe that, okay, we've got the overall strategy defined, and part of the strategy is to drive a particular improvement through the transformation, and they just go and get it. But I think eventually, no matter what decision you take in business, is it financial, is it more capability based, is it more automation, digital, everything has to touch a person at the end of it, and it is executed through a person. And unless you've got a full alignment and you've got the pulse of the people who are going to kind of ride on that transformation, you can't get it right. I think there are a few, and this is all by learning and kind of across the industry, and from my experience and as well. Once you define a transformation strategy, there are three critical aspects of that transformation strategy. So you've got a big global strategy or a business strategy coming in, and you say, okay, through my transformation, let's take a promotion management and trade promotion optimization, I can drive a particular area of improvement, let's say in terms of our promotion effectiveness, or just kind of making sure it's the right investment, right time. It varies, how prescriptive you want to be on that. I think one is obviously your digital part of it, which is definitely critical. But I believe, people jump onto it quickly and over-index it at the start. It is an enabler, an absolute non-negotiable enabler.
Of course.
But it will only enable if you are moving at pace on the other side of the organization, where is the recipient of it also evolving in capability to understand why you are doing it, and have you addressed the needs of what will be their resistance, what will be their concerns, because as you said, you can't fool around this.
No.
So once you get into something like you are analyzing your effectiveness in terms of any line of P&L, it is going to be black and white, which is not always the case before you get into transformation. So they are going to be exposed. They have to get into a habit of, it's fine if you are not hitting your numbers, it's fine if it's not working. And how do you kind of do that change management? So change management becomes a very, very important aspect, I believe, as important as the digital capability. And in my view, if you have to sequence it right, you get the change management and maybe a less evolved digital technology first, and then top it up with the more sophisticated technology once you have got them into motion. Because people are right now standing still. They don't have anything. And then you get into the most sophisticated tool and you say, you kind of run into a kind of a motorway kind of a speed while they have not even got into motion. So you have to get into motion, slowly phase it out. Between these two, what really, makes or breaks is the commitment to follow a standard ways of working. And by standard ways of working, we don't mean, all countries and all business, you will have the same process. But are you going to work across the same principles for that area? Do you agree on what are my key KPIs that I will need to look at, and I will look at it across? What are the key business principles in terms of investments that I will have to take? If that is going around, very differently and completely left to local autonomy, then you can get this all together. So it's a very, very interesting triangle, I would say, where your people and change management come really with the right phasing and right timing of technology intervention or digital intervention. At the same time, at the core of it, has there been a commitment and an alignment to work onto a common framework or a common ways of working?
And are there any very tangible ways in which you've looked to achieve this alignment, achieve this effectiveness? Is it very frequent reviews? Are there certain, without anything confidential, are there certain tools that you use internally?
So Yes and no. As I said, there's not been a silver bullet, and all that we are saying is quite conceptual. We know it will work, but when it gets to the ground, you are into complex mix. Definitely in terms of the ways of working, the framework definition. I think I've seen in the past in my organizations to a certain level that has been done beautifully well in terms of what are the key drivers we are after. If you're talking of investments, what are my key decision makers on the investment? Why am I doing the investment? Am I actually doing for volumes? Am I doing for profitability? Am just doing it for new products because I want to get more customers into it? So that's sort of a clarity, and that's sort of a KPI definition
Okay.
you can happen. What are the indicators that in terms of change management, honestly, it is always a science versus art. There will always be a very strong part of the art, no matter how scientific you get. So there will always be a level of resistance, a section of resistance, a section of adoption challenge that you'll always feel. I think the technology is the most scientific part. The only bit of art that plays in the digital intervention or technology part is right capability at the right time. How do we hold the gun, and which I've said, and I can't stress more, is what to release when,
Yes. Yeah.
and get them into momentum, and then top it up with more, because that's the easiest problem to solve, the quickest one to implement, and we feel like it's done. But that actually upsets and kind of completely turns around things. I've experienced situations where we've got with the best, most futuristic capabilities, but just the organization was not ready, the data was not ready, and you have to pull out, and then you are not going to go there again in the next 4 or 5 years,
Of course.
because you've just intimidated them that much.
You've been burned by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are there instances where you've had to, in mid-flight, stop, change on a transformation project?
Always, all the time. Very recently in PepsiCo, we had to do that without sharing details. Again, this is, I mean, one of the beautiful things about strategy is it will go wrong, and your preparedness to react to when it goes wrong is also part of your strategy. If you believe that you have done enough due diligence and thinking and got into a plan, that is just one hypothesis which you have translated into a granular plan, but you've not really prepared for a plan B and a plan C. We only can work best for two things. How early we get those indicators, and we get those. Don't just go ahead in taking a leap of faith that it'll work. If the indicators are that it's not going to work, just change your course of action. So yes, absolutely, you do have to do that. And there are two bits to strategy. One part of the strategy could be that an organization says, I want to do something disruptive. My growth, my strategy is really change the things, be the first one, do something different, and you are bound to have a high level of possibility of failing in there, not to the end state, but really not exactly working as it wants, and you should be prepared for that. The other part of the strategy is I know the ecosystem well. I am happy with my incremental growth plan, which is a more risk averse, but I'll have a strategy of how do I actually control the variables that I can control in this ecosystem, which is also a fair strategy, and the companies can follow that. In which case, obviously, you will always go for a little bit more proven, path, something that organizations have done. You have done, taken really, a conscious approach on that, and then you obviously have a little less possibility of hitting a blind spot there. And doesn't eliminate, make it to zero, and then obviously you can actually make slow progress, but slow and steady progress on that. And both are strategies, and I've seen both the sort of leaders at different vantage points taking this in the same organization as well.
And when we think about the big picture of strategy, as you were just describing before, and you're also describing some of the standard operating procedures and best practices we should put in place. So when I think about strategy, it's having that clear understanding of what does it mean to win, where do we want to go, what does the current state look like in terms of how we're performing, where are there opportunities, where are there threats, and then ultimately how do we bridge that gap between our current state and where we want to be. And that can be true for the global strategy of PepsiCo all the way through to the strategy of a £1 million business, doesn't really matter. Yeah. When you think about the strategy for the function that you lead, be revenue growth management, or even specifically within that, let's say it's trade promotion management, Do you leverage all of those best practices of strategy work, having a clear vision, what do we want to achieve, or are there bits that you pick and choose more specifically?
So if it's a good strategy, coming back again to my basic, it will be something which is, I would say, agnostic of your function. It is a direction, what we want to do, what we want, where do we want to travel, without getting into the technicalities of is it more relevant for marketing, or is it more relevant for transformation, or is it more relevant for supply chain, uh, and if that's a kind of a guiding theme, that is where your next level of leaders, and they kind of, how much have you empowered them, and how much have you taken them along while building the strategy
Yes.
comes into play. They should be able to then translate that strategy very clearly in terms of what it means for me as a transformation. And when I'm doing transformation, if our strategy is to really go and win new customers and make existing products profitable, if that's what we want to do, what are the areas of my revenue growth management promotion I will affect. Similarly, when it goes to supply chain, they'll say, okay, this is how I translate that guiding light in terms of saying, if you want to win new customers, probably we need to work on something to make it faster. If we have to make it more profitable, can we look at cost control, and things like that. So every function can translate, and every business unit can translate that. If it is not translatable, even if that's a word, by a particular business unit function, then what you have got is you've gone to the next level of strategy, to a sort of an execution plan. And that, obviously, the execution plan will vary by team, by organization. There's a very beautiful, sort of experience that I would like to share on this is, when I was working with GSK in the consumer healthcare business, particularly as part of the UK and Ireland business at a point in time, there always was a global guiding strategy which was easy to comprehend. But obviously, you'll have, for example, win new customers or win new products, or make it profitable, as just taking one part of it. When it comes to UK Ireland, the ecosystem is very different. You are into saturated market. You are already a fragmented market. So how do you translate that into something more contextual? Because otherwise you can say, what, this part of strategy is not for me because we can't
it's
do
not
that.
relevant.
Yeah, and that is where the leadership beautifully comes into play, because the head of the business then said, I will carry that strategy, but I will translate it into what it means for me. So when it means growth, does it really mean growth in terms of the numbers? Or if we are actually going to more channels, if we are actually just increasing the purchase, that is a growth of consumers as well for me. It's just a very, very masked example, obviously, but that's the beauty of strategy. If it is a direction, a guiding light, the leadership is engaged, then they should be able to translate. And it is possible that each person in the organization that believes that whatever I'm doing, it is actually going to contribute in a certain way. Doesn't mean don't get into the plan, but you don't think about the plan when you're doing this strategy.
And for someone in your role who sits in your seat, which I can appreciate is one that has some pressure on it, what are what we like to call the stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. challenges? What are the big pains that you experience that you're trying to overcome?
So particularly in my area, the whole influx of the jazzy AI and your data and insights based capabilities, what they're doing is, everyone is offering like a quick return on investment on those fronts. So you say, you kind of take one set of data, you run an AI engine, and you immediately get a beautiful insight which you can say, and then you can prove an ROI. Obviously, none of those are scalable because you do that in a very small. But that obviously excites the businesses and the markets a lot more, because you get in the ear, effectiveness or ROI or benefits, versus where I come from is almost like a fundamental foundational transformation. It is a long journey that you take to kind of completely transform how you are actually doing your end-to-end trade spends or trade promotions. It will be a long and painful journey, and when you'll come out of it, it will actually benefit you in all the different areas. But if you kind of pick up and say translate it into this line of the P&L, might not be able to translate. So one of the biggest challenge that we face internally is, how do we get the maturity and the sort of buy-in on some of these programs. And it's always hard because there are, it's almost like, all the companies internally work onto almost like a marketplace, operations. You plan for the next year, you go with stuff which actually are planning committing you to the in-year return, looks more value adding versus, got this big serious stuff which everyone appreciates but needs investment, needs time, needs a long time to kind of give it to. So that's particularly is my area of challenge. I think what we are doing as a collective strategy is, some of these needs market development, as we say, as we do in the external world. In a similar way, if you are having a product which you believe is absolutely essential for the organization, but obviously it will not have any immediate uptake to crowd fund it through all the markets. How do you get some central investments? How do you actually elevate the need and the capability of the team? At the same time, you have to actually realize that, what is the shelf life of some of the more jazzy products which you are getting an year benefit. Will they actually give you the same result versus, a transformation which you carry on for next 10-15 years? So those are the kind of transformation level challenges. I'll say, particularly in my area. On top of that, if you put the macroeconomic factor on it, it becomes all the more difficult because in the food and beverages industry right now where we operate in, obviously there's this huge pressure from the private labels coming in. The consumers are getting very smart and very picky. So there's not just, they are not just going to pick you because you are the brand. There's a lot of experimentation happening. There's a lot of focus on the healthier side of snacking and food. So if you have walked around the aisle and you would see, all our portfolio has turned into the baked and the less salt, and the HFS has compliant in the last kind of couple of years. Phenomenal job by done by the organization. So those pressures, those investments are more on priority, which actually again takes a little bit more. You're fighting for a much lesser pot in transformation, and of that, everyone is kind of looking for short-term rewards now. In those transformations.
And are there any particularly complex or particularly meaningful initiatives that you've been part of? Again, nothing confidential, but those that have taught you the most and really driven home some particular lessons?
I can share that because this is one of my first big transformation programs I did as part of the GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare India business. And a beautiful, very, very, kind of contenting, program that we are on. So we were actually going out and automating 1,100 field force reps in the market to kind of do the whole order collection on the ground. And this is before your Android era. So there was no Android phone at that time. There was an iPhone which was cost prohibitive even for personal use, let alone giving out to 1,100.
It hadn't really translated to that.
So we actually were experimented with those. If you had ever seen the big Windows phone with the stylus, which was, with no offense to Microsoft, kind of a computer brought into a kind of a 5.5-6-inch screen with the stylus. And the biggest challenge was in India, when we talk of CAMs over here, the account managers, they are all school and university educated graduates who understand, what's the strategy and thinking behind it. In India, we're talking of the mom and pop stores where these people just go and take orders on a pen and a paper. And most of them are school dropouts. So no level of sophistication in terms of why we are doing it. And I personally lived a salesman's life. Then, with the suitcase, kind of going around India and kind of enabling that. Couple of very big learnings in there. It was truly the first time I really felt almost close to the business user or the actual user and realized, whatever we kind of define in our boardrooms and our corporate offices means nothing until you have actually experienced the ground. The other is, the user wants very simple things. They don't care of, what you're trying to drive. We were trying to drive a couple of key, very clear initiatives through that. We wanted to sell more and, we wanted to increase the frequency of sale, but he doesn't get anything. And that is where, the simplicity of strategy comes. He's like, end of the day, they used to get an incentive and the incentive was calculated based on the order value. And there was a science behind it which we were trying to say. But the first screen on the screen there on the application that we had every morning to kind of get him engaged was, what is your incentive today?
Yeah.
And that brought a smile on the user. And then he suddenly saw the value, because he thought that with a paper and pen, I would actually go and ask my territory sales executive, and he'll say, it's on my laptop and I'll probably get it to you tomorrow, or I'll give you a printout. I just don't know what I've done today. Here, at the end of the day and every morning, you know what you have achieved.
It's literally right in front of you.
It's literally right in front of you. And that was the whole strategy for him. That's, what's my strategy. That just won it. So the whole solution we designed, keeping that user in mind, because that was the last mile if it doesn't happen there. A very, very enriching program. One of my best in terms of executions always. And the scale was massive, with 1,100 reps kind of all across the country.
But it's very, very interesting, isn't it? Because ultimately, no matter what, it comes down to understanding very, very clearly what are the jobs to be done, what are the requirements of the customer. In this case, the customer you were serving in part was internal. It was the reps that were out on the road. And then how do we, no matter if we're talking about transformation, no matter if we're talking about supply chain, how do we solve the requirements, the needs, and the challenges of those particular customers, be them internal or external? Yeah,
there has to be something for them. And once they get what they want, your whole SOP kicks in. So we got such an insightful data after that, because now the CAM was invested to do it more often. Make sure, he's kind of signing off, uploading it at the end of the day. So there was this upload, because there was no GPS connectivity. So you had to connect to a Wi-Fi. He was making sure he's doing all of that, because he wanted to see, what my incentive is before he sleeps off. And that meant, we are getting all the granular data in the field, and kind of getting it up, and we can analyze almost every day. So we can actually define next day when you're going to a store, do you want to make any change to the order, and we can push that back. And so absolutely brilliant. Everyone, kind of had a win-win situation in that program. So very close to my heart.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And clearly you're very passionate about it. And that was the world of small data, let's say, but now we very much live in the world of big data, and we live in a significantly more advanced environment. And the work that you do, even if we just take trade promotion management and the data that I'm sure you're able to gather from that at an organization such as PepsiCo, I would imagine that's gold standard, that's world class. How are you, and you mentioned AI, but how are you as an organization able to sift through and leverage in a really meaningful way the data that you collect now? Because it's no longer salespeople on the road inputting and uploading at the end of the day. It's real, it's live, it's all encompassing, but I can imagine also it can be overwhelming.
No, absolutely. And there's a lot happening on that front, and it is not surprising because you have to move at pace. I think there are, again, 2 or 3 different areas of how you use the data. And the first one is, I would say, has not drastically changed from 10 years back, which is basically, your top 5 management KPIs, which is actually based on your internal financial measures, what you're after in terms of your investments, your profitability. So less worried about that, because that's always almost like your financial performance KPIs. Okay, that is a minimum you have to get regardless of that. And no matter how much big data you get, ultimately those 5 KPIs will matter. We call it either the new reality of how it works, etc. The second one is where obviously you were doing a lot of planning. And using the data from the past to plan for ahead. That is where a big boost by the sort of AI and optimization capabilities that we have. So if you have to kind of analyze a lot of a particular customer data to kind of plan for the next month, the next 3 months, what you were doing earlier was actually picking out, okay, I can't do it for all customers with the same level of science. Let me just pick my top 2 and try to kind of do it for them. And that also, you can probably manually run 2 or 3 different scenarios. But what AI is not doing is actually running thousands and thousands of scenarios for all your customers. And you can build the logic. What really needs to be done is how well you know your business, so that you can train the AI to kind of get the feedback. But that's a massive area
that comes
we are
back to
working
the art versus science
the
of
art
it,
versus
because
science.
there's
Absolutely.
always that level of intuition and gut
Yes.
feel and
Absolutely.
real life
And just knowing the customer.
yes.
It's a people to people interaction,
Exactly.
right? So it's a human to human, unless there is two AI, one from the supplier and one who's, kind of talking, it's a human to human.
We'll get there not too long, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely flirt around with it. I'm not sure if it will become a BAU, but that's the second part. So massive help from all the big data, the machine learning optimization running behind an AI doing that. The third level is where you are doing a lot of insight generation based on the data you already have, which is not for planning ahead, but kind of understand, what went well, what we should be changing in terms of a strategy. If we had a certain strategy in terms of investment, should it need to change? And that's based on again, probably not as much of big data in my area. When you get into the marketing and the consumer side of things, obviously is big data. That is where it's a beautiful mix of the Gen AI capabilities as well as the traditional form of form of insights that you have, because it's not just skimming through a large sets of data. There's a structured data, there's a structured set of indicators that are there, but really you can't actually go through it for the last 2 years for all your customers and drive some kind of a strategy at scale to kind of get those insights. And that is where Gen AI becomes absolutely beautiful. So what we are experimenting to do is can you have a kind of a generative AI layer over your big data set that you already always used, which has always driven, giving you insights, but you can get it faster, you can get it simpler, and again back to say you can get it across the board rather than actually going to customers. So those three I would say are the key kind of different areas of on how we are looking at. Obviously, this is not taking into consideration the completely external world of social listening and the consumer data, which is kind of using these capabilities, but probably will be structured into a slightly different.
So, Apoorva, I don't want to keep you for too long, and I'm aware that our conversation has touched upon many different areas today. But a question I'm very keen to pose to you is, if I was to give you a scenario where we were sitting down in 3 years' time and maybe having a coffee somewhere or a beer or even sitting here having another conversation, and I was to say to you, you've achieved, not just as an individual, but the team have achieved fantastic success in the last 3 years. What do you put that down to? What are the 2 or 3 things that you nailed, that you really executed on? What would they be? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I just wanted to challenge you with that question.
Great. So very heavy question, especially in this time when there's so many variables changing in the marketplace, both in terms of organizations as well as the overall consumer space. I mean, I'm just thinking, and I'm just speaking what I believe personally. Could be the power which will make, as we say, differentiate the great companies from the good ones, because everyone is getting onto the data and the big data and the AI kind of a bandwagon blindlessly, because it's an existential crisis right now. You can't afford to not do that. But who is doing a kind of a me too sort of a kind of a scenario versus who are really going down the level deep in terms of what exactly do I need in filtering. So couple of things I think would actually take us to a level where we'd say, we are proud of what we did,
yes,
and how we crossed this wave in the last 3 years. I think when it comes to AI, it has to be very contextualized to the company.
Okay.
Obviously the whole generative AI on an open data space is very, in my belief, it very soon reach to a saturation point where no 2 results or insights will be very different. So how do you actually get the capability to build your own internal AI engines to run on focused data set and curate them to kind of drive the results in the area that you want, because your internal data is the power, is the gold mine. I mean, every AI solution is driven either, how beautifully you have designed the algorithm, or how good the data behind it. And any organization's competitive advantage is the data that they own, not the data that is available publicly, because everyone will have the same access to the same level of data. So I think that contextualizing and curating of an internal AI capability rather than picking something which is proven in the market, just plug it in, it won't work. The other part is there's this whole mad debate about AI replacing the jobs and the human, which will definitely happen in some regards for certain technicalities. But I honestly believe even in the most transactional of jobs that the humans do, there is a human level of intelligence that is built, which you cannot model. So how do we actually make sure that whatever automations we are doing, the model is able to capture that, and at the same time, we are also upskilling, the team to kind of drive more of those insights and decision making rather than actually doing shitload of heavy work through the spreadsheets and data to kind of get there. Because there's this whole piece, what I beautifully read is like the decision making takes 5% of the time, and 95% of time right now is to get to that point where you can have the right data. That part, probably, your AI and your technology interventions can do, the digital capabilities can do. But how do we secure that human intervention in the rush to kind of just eradicate the whole transactional layer? There is a huge risk that the organization will eradicate that last 5% of human intelligence, which actually is the make or break, really, in terms of differentiating yourself. I think those two I would probably say, and then third, definitely at an organization level, we need to upskill everyone, not to become modelers on the AI, but just to understand the power of AI, so that you don't feel scared about it, but you kind of really understand, how I can use it for my advantage to work with me. I always believe these capabilities have to be complementary to what you bring on the table, rather than kind of replacing you, completely.
No, definitely. I mean, and for example, on that note, I have a belief, which is just a personal belief, that there is, of course, immense power and immense efficiency and effectiveness to be gained through AI. But sometimes we have a habit at this stage to think too big. Whereas actually, if we think about marginal gains for the individuals within my team or the individual roles, if I could gain 5 or 10% efficiency through each of those, through leveraging the tangible, very practical elements of AI today, well, that would translate into big impact. And yes, then of course there are the big transformational elements of AI and what can we do in the longer term. But one of the elements that I completely agree with you that I think is missing today is that pragmatism. How can I actually begin to leverage this in a small scale way today to experience the benefits? Lastly then, and I promise this is the very last question, you clearly are someone who is very passionate around what you do and very intellectual and well read on these type of topics. Is there a particular book or a theory or a model, and I'm sure there are quite a few, but is there one maybe that you could name check that you've seen a lot of benefit in, that you've come across or maybe keep coming back to?
So actually, I'm really the worst person to comment on that, because believe it or not, Ben, I am not much into reading. That's a habit that always been on my bucket list. I can't recommend which article.
Of course,
But when you read, or listen to to an article or a video, I do listen to a lot of bite-sized kind of podcasts and videos of sort, but on a variety of topics, not generally for AIs. Just don't get overexcited just because a book says that, because everyone is trying to sensationalize a thing, a few things. That's how it sells. Just take it back to 20 years back, and just trying to remember, was there something similar, maybe at a 50% efficiency or accuracy, working for you? And I do believe there were indications back then that this will just blow out and scale, and that's what's happening, and it will continue its own path.
Well, thank you, Apoorva. Really appreciate the time today, and fantastic to have your insight, your expertise, but also your candor, your honesty on a number of different topics. And for me personally, it's been hugely fascinating. So thank you again for that. Look forward to speaking more again sometime soon, and all the best in the meantime. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ben. Really enjoyed this this conversation. I didn't really realize where time went actually.